In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful. For those who don't know me, my name is Puya Pirmaleki, PhD in Management, Director of HudHud International Webinar Series. Today's webinar is our 15th webinar. Our first speaker is Professor Jody Fry, Regents Professor of Management and Leadership, Texas A&M University, Central Texas. He is the Program Director of MS Leadership for Sustainability Program and Chair of Governing Board of One Planet Education Networks and founder of International Institute of Spiritual Leadership. His recent publication is Global Leadership for Sustainability. So without further ado, I want to invite Professor Jody Fry to start his speech.
Well, thank you, Puya. I really appreciate this opportunity to share our work on an aspect of spiritual leadership which we worked on in the area for a number of years, over 20 years now. And we talk about the source of spiritual leadership as being an inward journey of self-transcendence, of realizing that of our own self-propulsion, we cannot find the happiness that we seek, and that it must be a spiritual journey to experience that. And so what I'm gonna do is share with you our work on being-centered leadership, which was initially published in Human Relations in 2009, and our latest work on that was just recently published in June in the Journal of Business Ethics, and it is called A Framework for Leader Spiritual and Moral Development. And in that paper, we fleshed out what that looks like at each level of being. So if anybody is interested in that, please contact me. And I'll be glad to share that paper with you. So first thing I'm going to do is just introduce the general overview of the levels of being as a spiritual journey, and then I'll tie it into the three-step illuminative, purgative, illuminative, and unitive stages of spiritual development with its two dark nights of the soul, and talk a little bit about that. And I hope it then sets the stage for David's talk. So our initial work on the spiritual journey again was published in Human Relations, and let me just first go to this first slide. And in that paper, really it was in a previous paper in 2005 that we published, that was published by Mark Krieger, who was one of my co-authors on the 2009 piece. And he worked with an Islamic scholar and reviewed 5 of the world's major religious traditions, and in these traditions, they found inherent in these traditions were these 5 levels of spiritual development, or the spiritual journey. And so we didn't make these up. In other words, they're grounded in 5,000 years of wisdom tradition. Now, there are various other approaches to spiritual development in terms of levels. One of the most popular is spiral dynamics that various scholars have developed and that are found in the management literature. But this was published in a special issue of Leadership Quarterly on spiritual leadership in 2005. And so Mark and I built upon this table that was in that article to develop our theory of being-centered leadership. So we do believe that this is grounded, and that these levels are present and do represent an accepted way, at least among the world's major traditions, of the spiritual journey of self-transcendence and seeking the non-dual or God, or however one defines that. Most theories of leadership, and where most people experience existence, or in the sense of their being or their essence or their ontological experience, is primarily at levels 5 and levels 4. And level 5 has to do with having and doing. Most leadership theories are about what traits do we have, or competencies do we have, or what do we do as a leader. And much of what leaders are focused on is the trappings of leadership: position, power. How do I plan, organize, and lead and control for organizational effectiveness and my own recognition. And most recently, really within the last 30 or 40 years, the role of vision and values has become dominant in the major leadership theories that you find in the textbooks, and that are consultants are relying on in their practices with organizations. And those are primarily transformational, authentic, ethical, spiritual, and servant leadership. Those are the 5 dominant leadership models or theories that you find in the literature. And this then moves beyond, and one thing I should say before I move on is each of these levels is holonic. And that means each lower level is embedded in the higher level, just like systems in the body are holonic. Got cells, organs, systems, and then the whole body. And so the level of images and imagination incorporates and then moves beyond level 5. So it's not that leaders don't have and do when they're leading from the level 4 of images and imagination, only control rather than command and control through standardization, centralization, and formalization. Control comes from culture and vision. And so ultimately, it's about socially constructing a reality that creates a common alignment between the leadership or elites in the organization and the workers in the organization. However, at this level, it is still centered on organizational effectiveness or satisfaction of the leadership team and the leader's needs for recognition and riches. And so this is where most leadership takes place. Now, level 3 is what I call the gateway, and this is one of the aspects of the levels of being, that it's a gateway to or the commitment for entering into the spiritual journey. People have that enter this level have realized the futility of seeking happiness at levels 5 and 4. And so I have some expansion on that I'll then talk about. So again, here's level 5. Main characteristic is leadership based on having and doing in the physical observable world based on the 5 senses. And it's focused on desired effectiveness outcomes. And then the level 4 way of being is vision values, socially constructing reality, a common reality among the organizations, but it's still, in creating that agreement, it motivates followers to higher levels of organization commitment and performance, primarily to satisfy the leaders or elites' needs, often or most often at this level at the expense of the workers. And so then level 3, we call the level of consciousness, or a commitment to consciousness. And ultimately, this in being the ontological experience of, or the essence of living in the world now, because the past and the future don't exist. This is the only place where we truly can live. And to the extent we are living in the past and in anger or resentment, or living in the future in worry or fear, which are the two emotions that then cloud our ability from a leadership standpoint to be effective. And so when I teach my course on leadership formation, I say, if you had a practice that would help you be more clear and present in the moment so that you could recognize these negative emotions that might cloud your judgment, wouldn't it be useful for you as a leader to do that? So I kind of trick them in a way, and because they're still thinking with level 4, level 5 thinking is, how can me personally, be more effective as a leader? And so this then moves them into the gateway or the commitment of the spiritual journey that I'll show in a different way here when I get to the 3 ways of the spiritual journey. And so the goal is, in terms of being present, is to really experience our own ego in action, and then also adopt various spiritual practices to move beyond those, to understand that being other-centered and truly caring and loving and serving others is the true path to happiness. And so it's not that level 3 goes away, but it has to become a way of life. And to the experience that one becomes more other-centered or self-transcended and truly cares about others and wants to love and serve them, then leaders are better able, and this is the level of spiritual leadership, they're better able to understand and empathize followers, stakeholders. Of course, I've been working in the area of sustainability and sustainable development the last 5 years, and so this moves the idea of being centered leadership beyond just focusing inside the organization, but how do we engage with stakeholders so that we can come together in alignment to address the serious social and environmental issues that the world faces through the lens of business. I am in a college of business, and my latest paper that I'm working on is about how to lead transformative multi-sector partnerships through global leadership for sustainability, which is grounded in spiritual leadership. And so that means before we can truly have a sustainable world, we must have a critical mass of level 3 and level 2 leaders. You can't fix the world with the thinking that got us here. And so I say this a lot, that we'll never satisfy or be able to change the world for the better so that we can have a more sustainable world with the current geopolitical and country leaders or elites that are currently flying around in polluting jets, meeting in resorts to talk about how we're going to save the planet. It's only through spiritual development and the commitment to the spiritual journey that the world will truly change. And so this is really my commitment and my passion. And this is one reason every chance I get to talk in forums like this, to hopefully raise the level of awareness and the commitment. Now, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but hopefully we can go out and get in front of others to do that. And then the level 1 way of being is a level, the non-dual level, the level of all that is and all that isn't. It is possible for us to experience level 1, although very few individuals has ever been able to maintain their leadership or their existence at this level. The great religious leaders, Moses, Muhammad, Jesus Christ, or Buddha are some examples. And so the goal of, and then at level 2s and level 1, the distinction begins to dissolve between leaders and followers. We become one in a common journey of self-transcendence and truly changing the world. And so my last slide is then the threefold path. We call it the threefold path of spiritual transformation. It's really of spiritual leadership, but it's really the threefold path that St. John of the Cross in Christianity developed and talked about in the 15th century. So this is where this initially comes from. And there's three phases or states that St. John talked about: the purgative, the illuminative, and the unitive. And I get this from Margaret Benefield, who's now the executive director of the Shalom Spiritual Directors Institute in Washington, D.C., so I'll make sure I give her credit. And so the idea here is that people who hit that wall at level 5 and level 4, and they often in midlife, that realize that the pursuit of he or she who dies with the most of wins is not really a pursuit worthy and will not lead to happiness. And so this is where one awakens to, or it becomes willing to enter that gateway of level 3 that I talked about, that there is a spirituality. Of course, this is a Christian approach, and basically discovers that God gives good gifts. Our prayers are answered, and that following a spiritual path or committing to a spiritual practice can bring an added dimension of happiness in life. And also discovering addictions and attachments and egoistic programs that are preventing us from entering this state of being. So level 3, as you can see, there is the gateway. And so, but what happens is God is not Santa Claus. I always say that it is not all about getting what we want and our prayers being answered. It's also and so the abundant gifts begin to dry up, and you wonder, where is God? He's not answering my prayers. You know what I'm doing wrong, and so you pray harder, but what you get is just more dryness. But if you persist, and this is the key in the spiritual journey, is don't give up. Don't stop right before you strike the vein of gold, in mining terms. And so what then becomes, what emerges as you emerge from the dark night of soul, and I want to say there are many dark nights. It's not like you arrive and then you're there. There's always another piece of your ego that pops up that holds you back from happiness. So it's a common evacuation of these aspects of our ego. And so, but what happens then is you discover that the spiritual journey is not about getting gifts, but it's about our own transformation. And in this true happiness lies, and begin to commit to do God's work, which is go inside, which we talk about in spiritual leadership, to go inside, go inward, to find a source of strength greater than ourselves, which is level 3, so that we can move beyond our own selfish egoic programs to truly move forward to help and love and serve others. And so in that discovery, the focus of our spirituality and the focus of our journey is transformed. However, that's not the end of it, because then things dry up again, and you enter the second dark night of the soul, where again our approaches, our spiritual practices seem to still to stop working. God has again seemed to disappear, and we try alternative methods and different ways and practices, but don't seem to be doing very well. But what we then begin to realize that it's not just about our own self-transformation, which is still inherently selfish, but it's about being one with God. And so then this is the fully letting go, or what's called surrender, to the illusion that we have really any control over people, places, and things. We have really no power. And then this is where you begin to have those experiences. Usually when you have this flash of release from the surrender, that you have this union with God. And then this, even though you will still be living at levels 3 and 2 more consistently, you can be at any of these levels multiple times in a day. They're not stair steps. Well, then you truly become more committed to living and exercising the various spiritual practices such as discernment is one, and commitment to the spiritual journey and the formation of our spiritual formation. So this is and I never thought about this before, Puya, and I really thank you for giving me this opportunity, because both of these are in chapter 3 of our book on maximizing the triple bottom line through spiritual leadership that we published in 2013. But I've never thought about putting them together this way. And so I really want to thank you for that. And I hope I haven't run over time. So I'll return it back to you.
Thank you so much, Judy. There are some questions. Some of our audiences ask some questions. For example, Yu Rong, PhD student from University of Nevada, ask a question. What is the future of leadership that adopts such a being-centered view?
If leaders, if we get a critical mass, doesn't have to be 50%, but if we can get a critical mass of leaders who are more able to live at levels 3 and levels 2, we will truly change and transform the world. And our vision at the International Institute for Spiritual Leadership is to co-create a conscious, sustainable world that works for everyone. And so that's how I would answer that question.
Thank you. Another question, Professor Eldon Weeb from Crandall University, Canada, asked this question. How does being-centered leadership theory overcome the instrumentality of management?
Well, that's a real good question, and I've had students break down and cry because they're living in those level 5 and level 4 and often very dysfunctional organizations, and how in the world can we transform these organizations? And the answer is you probably can't, but what you can have is a sphere of influence. We all have a sphere of influence, and that's what leadership is about. Exercising influence to bring others in alignment to achieve goals. And in this case, the goals we talked about here, the states of being that we talked about here. But I think mainly it's going to come from individuals and organizations over time that start new organizations. Social entrepreneurship, various organizations. If you look at the Fortune 100 over the last 20, 25 years, a very small percentage of those organizations, or 50 years, a very small percentage of those organizations are still in that list. And so this is a multi-generational exercise, and it may be Gen Z or Gen ... or whatever it is before this ever happens. But to the extent we can work now to raise this levels of awareness, and I talk about finding people who are predisposed, who have hit that wall, who are searching. This is attraction, not promotion. You can't go out and sell it, just like you can't really sell true religion. You have to live that religion, and then people will come to you because of who you are, the essence of who you are, and then they want what you've got. Same thing's true in recovery programs. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's,
Thank you, Judy. Let's move. Thank you. There are lots of questions here, but
let's move on. I want to hear David.
So
let's move on.
Yeah, let's move on to the presentation of Professor David Prim. Can you hear me, David?
Yes, I can hear you quite fine, Puya. I'm just going to
thank you. Do you have any comments on Judy's presentation?
I do, and I do. Thank you, Jody, very much for the presentation. And although I come at the topic from a slightly different angle, what I would like to suggest is that anything I'm about to say is completely consistent with what you've already presented. from if you like a non-theistic perspective, although you do engage some God talk at the end of your presentation, and you also appeal to the to the concept of transcendence. So both of those are key, of course, in spirituality from a faith-based perspective. So thank you for that. So I'm hoping anything I say will complement and perhaps engage conversation in the two.